Us right away to get to our tour. So we have three speakers. You may have, if you've seen the new schedule, we actually have a few changes in the schedule. Ms. Jessica Scott, I believe, is not here. I don't believe she was able to attend the conference. So we do have some changes. First, we'll have Dr. Marika will give her a presentation. Then we'll have Dr. Yalkin from Turkey and Antonis, our very gracious host here at the OAK, will give a presentation. Then we have a video that we're going to show you. It's been pre-recorded, about a 15-minute video, and that's from Dr. Cardoso Duarte Jose from Portugal. So why don't we start? I think we can give about 30 minutes to each speaker, so I'll let you use the time however you want. I'll give you a 20-minute warning if you want to leave some time for discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm going to tell you something about populism and climate change from a depth psychological point of view. I'll briefly introduce myself. I've been involved in the ecumenical climate movement in the Netherlands on the European level and since 2000 for the WCC, the World Council of Churches. And while monitoring so many of the UN climate conferences, the COPs, my frustration over the lack of progress there grew, as I'm sure with all of you. So around 8 years ago, I wanted to find a couple of answers as to why there was so little progress. And I turned to the analytical depth psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. I studied that for 4 years, and I did find some interesting answers. 2 years ago, I did a presentation here on climate change and Jungian psychology. And in the follow-up, my fellow members of the working group on climate change asked me to do a similar study on populism. So I tried to do that. As we all know, populism is on the rise in many developed countries around the world. It's potentially dangerous, not only because of the related tendencies such as racism, xenophobia, and extremism, but also because many populists are climate deniers. Therefore, populist movements can delay or complicate urgently needed climate policies. In short, I tried to analyze populism as much as possible from a depth psychological perspective, but it proved to be too narrow because socio-economic factors also play an important role. So I will try to touch upon both in this short presentation. So first of all, what is populism? You can have several ways to describe it. What I do here is, I would say that populists in general feel disadvantaged, not heard. They believe that an elite makes decisions without their input, decisions that are not in favor or in their interest. Especially right-wing populists feel threatened by refugees and migrants, and they feel that their own original culture is under pressure. This will result in a counter-movement against decision makers, and it can even lead to new people in power, like in the case of President Trump. But it also leads to less interest for and participation in society in many cases. So first, the socio-economic factors. I tried to zoom out a little bit from a helicopter view, try to look at what I call the dominant neoliberal financial economic system, for short DFAS, that has been spreading over the last decades, and we know that as globalization. I don't agree with that term, but that's how it's commonly called. Many governments in that process have handed over control of public areas to the corporate world, to the markets, and became themselves an intrinsic part of the corporate world through shareholding. So the boundaries between the public and private realms became blurred. In order to overcome the 2008 global financial crisis, we all know, of course, public money was used to save private institutions such as banks, and in fact the DFAS as such. But in spite of criticism of the DFAS after this crisis, there has been no systemic change to date. On the contrary, the corporate world has been expanding its influence in lawmaking. Many administrations don't bother, or they struggle to make regulations stricter. This is our current reality. As a result of this withdrawal of governments, societal systems based on solidarity, such as social safety nets, unions, healthcare systems, education, pension funds, weakened. In many, and this is very general, of course, there's no time to go deeper into this. In many DFAS countries, labor migration has led and is leading to growing immigrant populations, often with different religions, cultures, and languages. And at the same time, new technologies and artificial intelligence are on the rise. All this combined has led and is leading to widespread socio-economic insecurity and anxiety, mistrust of politics, governments, and a growing gap between rich and poor, also within the DFAS countries. Oxfam reported in 2019, half a year ago or so, that the possessions of 26 individuals equal those of the poorest half of the world's population. So it's incredible when you think about that. So most of these old DFAS countries are proud, this is something that especially white people will recognize, I think, that there are equal opportunities for all. This is kind of a given when we grow up. The overall message is you're a free individual, you're on your own, and if you do your best and you compete well, you will succeed in life. The American dream, yeah? But in modern times, this notion of equal opportunities has become hollow. Because more and more, education must be paid for by its recipients rather than by the state, resulting in a considerable advantage for those from rich families. Many old-fashioned professions, for example, a street worker or a construction worker or care workers in hospitals, many of these old-fashioned professions have downgraded in valuation and are heavily underpaid, inciting young people to seek a profession that may not suit them. Why? Because somehow, and now we're getting somewhat deeper, the mores of the corporate world have invaded society, seducing it with a hero image that many feel called to pursue. This seduction, or even imposition, I would say, is carried by aggressive advertising on television, internet, and in the new media. This marketed hero image is that of an independent, rich, young, healthy, beautiful person who has succeeded in life and has it all. Yeah? In short, a winner. Anyone less fortunate is considered less worthy, a loser. That is the hidden message. It's never spoken out loud, but it's the hidden message. But the notion of these equal opportunities, although it has become hollow, is strongly interwoven still with the fabric of many societies. So many people believe that equal opportunities do in fact exist. Combined with this hero image imposed by the markets, this creates a very strong psychological pressure to become a winner hero. So, but of course, as we all know, in real life, this so-called heroism is unattainable in most cases. So many people unconsciously blame themselves for this failure because there were equal opportunities, so why can't I then be a success? Hence, they become vulnerable to, and now we are getting deeper again, to flawed identity formation. Identity formation is the process that every individual goes through in childhood and adult when he's an adult. So the hero image imposed by the markets leads to addictive consumerism, because if you can't be the hero, then you'll consume him, and identification with the heroes perceived as such, the strongly marketed, those marketed when they're heroes. When you think of sports and pop music heroes, or political strong men, and the degree of identification with these people that borders on hysteria. Social media amplify this effect to unimaginable proportions and make followers, on social media for example, of many people with weak personal identities. So you get a blurred identity formation because the market imposes an image and many are often unconsciously, they want to follow that. But that's not all, because the pressure to become a winner hero has also invaded politics. Since a couple of decades, not political ideas, but politicians are placed in the foreground. Yeah? These politicians magnify their personal importance and career in a narcissistic manner through social media and other media, aiming for many followers, for example, US President Trump. But after their political activities, or before their political, they often disappear in high corporate positions, ignoring public interest altogether. So no wonder that many ordinary people have lost confidence in politics and governments, because who is listening to the needs of so many in an era of self-centered politicians and government withdrawal from the public domain? No wonder that many people look for a strong man, a political hero to follow. Now we come into more depth psychology. What are now the effects of this flawed identity formation? If you try to imagine when you grow up and you see all these advertisement images and you think this is the way I should be. It can be cosmetics, but it can go far beyond that. Yeah? It can lead to a narcissistic, rigid personality structure, because you want to be that and something doesn't go along, you get narcissistic. Such a person easily feels threatened and senses a strong need to belong. So they will seek shelter in their own group or tribe, as it's commonly called when we talk about populism. Such a group, a tribe, is close to the outer world. No one from outside will be allowed in. But this narcissism often hides semi or unconscious feelings of powerlessness, insecurity, inferiority, being a loser, mental paralysis, and or anger and stubbornness in deeper layers of the psyche, which are of course linked to this failure of becoming a hero. So in order to break through those unpleasant feelings, we get a couple of strong psychological mechanisms. They start to play a role. First of all, identification with heroes, can be projection identification with heroes, and docility, as in following heroes on social media and so forth. Secondly, the reinvention of and the retreat into the own historic group, which I just mentioned, the tribe, while emphasizing its identity and importance. And three, we get deeper still, true or false victimhood, combined with the designation of a scapegoat. Now here you have, in short, the characteristics of populism. Populist regressive identity formation. It is a kind of regressive identity formation going back to the own tribe. It can be seen as analog to psychological regression as a result of trauma, stress, or fear, which is more commonly known. So where do this victimhood and scapegoat mechanism come into play? In depth psychology, victimhood, victim behavior, and the scapegoat mechanism are well-known phenomena. Victimhood means that a person or a group is or considers himself or herself a victim of something or someone. And then victim behavior comes into play. Victim behavior has a negative connotation in that psychology because the affected person places responsibility for his or her well-being and actions with others, while he or she remains passive and designates a scapegoat. It's your fault that I feel so bad, for example. In populist circles, this scapegoat can be refugees, labor migrants, climate migrants, I could add, non-white people, women. Very often populists are very misogynist or very anti-women, anti-feminist, left-wing politicians, large parts of society, and even climate change as fake news, because many consider it fake news or don't believe it or whatever. But there is a flip side to the coin, because on the other hand, true victimization often remains hidden. What is true victimization? Think of the real victims of climate change, who are people in poor countries in the first place. But populists also can be real victims of a system that favors the rich and famous, for example, and ignores or makes insignificant people with simple jobs, or jobless people, or ill people. In other words, vulnerable people, because we are not allowed to be vulnerable anymore in our societies. So when it comes to populism, it's imperative to distinguish its true victimhood from the false victimhood. So then you can discern what is what, and then you can take adequate measures. Now, from a Jungian perspective, why is it that we are all, and I mean all of us, are so vulnerable to this marketed hero image? This is a very Jungian notion, the archetypes. Probably many of you know what archetypes are. These are hidden psychological clusters, like mother archetype, father archetype, and one of the most important ones is the hero archetype. Again, the hero. But the hero archetype in Jungian psychology stands for the inner struggle to reach psychological maturity that every person has to go through. It means by gaining strength, often by diffusing an imminent danger, breaking free from parental guidance and accepting responsibility. This is the meaning of the hero archetype. So a new identity, a new reality is created. Many myths, legends, fairy tales all over the world tell about this heroic struggle. Their popularity can be explained by the semi-conscious recognition or knowing somewhere, somehow, in all readers and listeners. So the assumption of my research is that the imposed false hero image by the markets is resonating with the hero archetype that we all have inside us. So during the archetypical struggle to reach maturity, psychological maturity, a person is his or her own hero. It's a necessary phase for everyone for adequate identity building. But when this process gets tangled up through identification with the imposed false hero image, a person may remain his or her own hero in a perverted sense. There you go with your narcissism. So it leads to inflation, that is the term we use. Inflation, which means an inflated self-image, narcissism. But again, this often hides insecurity and anxiety. Another possibility is that this person who is affected by the hero image splits off this desired hero position because he can't reach it. He projects it onto a perceived hero, such as a political leader, athlete, pop artist, etc., identify with this person, but then resorts in a borrowed, weak identity and followership or docility, following this person. This idolatry could even be seen as present-day Roman bread and play. There are many ill effects. Especially young women will easily suffer from unhealthy addictive perfectionism, burnout, other negative effects. And others, especially men, will resort to this reinvented historic group identity and rebel against other groups. With scapegoat mechanism again. Now, coming to climate change, as we're sitting here, we all know that climate change is finally getting more political attention, but many populists consider it fake news. Populists feel that governments use climate change, when there are non-populist governments, I should add, that they use climate change to force through technological and energy innovations while depositing the bill with society, and especially with socially weaker groups. And they have a point. Because in societies where environmental costs are still ignored and carbon taxes still heavily debated, vigilance is in order to ensure that the transition costs are shared fairly. So they have a point here, but the problem of the overall populist stance is that the climate policy agenda can become a scapegoat and hence meet with a lot of resistance. There you go with your resistance. And this is dangerous because we need very much pressure from society for the adoption of adequate climate policies. We're in a very vulnerable place right now. Huh? The climate summit in New York didn't really succeed. We're still in a very vulnerable place, so we need the pressure from society to push through. So it's imperative for the climate movement to recognize this climate denial tendency and understand and support the needs of the socially disadvantaged, including, and maybe especially, populist movements. We have to look into it seriously. And not only climate change is denied, climate denial can be brought up by normal anxiety, normal people. We all, as we are here, we all have a little bit of this anxiety. Where are we going? How dangerous is it? Etc. So, normal anxiety. But also globalization, labor migration, climate migration, new technologies, artificial intelligence, these are all real or potential or perceived threats for jobs and for people's livings. So the less certain one is of his or her means of existence, the less likely one is to acknowledge other threatening challenges such as climate change. So if you're very anxious to lose your job because of a robot or whatever, I mean, climate change is too much. It's just too much. We cannot cope with that. So therefore, it is imperative to turn back to secure employment, thriving public sphere, now going back to the socio-economic factors to make the circle round, and strong social safety nets, so that people can feel accepted and they can be assured of having their means of existence. But unfortunately, right now, the prevailing political stance is that green defense, so a green economy, but then a neoliberal model, can tackle climate change. So the prevailing political opinion is we should grow economies and then in a green way. There is no word about social safety or public sphere whatsoever. There is still little attention in politics or media for the intricate link between climate change, social justice, poverty, migration, and war. Yet this third road offers the best option to address and solve these issues in their coherence. For that to happen, we must distinguish true from false victimhood. Install free education so you can create a level playfield. Return to a more balanced financial valuation and psychological valuation and respect and esteem of all professions, also the garbage collector, also the construction worker, while dismantling this false hero image which is imposed on us by the markets. Only then can everyone develop a more realistic identity and worldview, including the reality of climate change and the equivalency of sexes and races and all that goes with populism. So only then the odds will increase that humanity can avoid disasters as a result of climate change or warfare. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. That was perfectly on time. We do have a few minutes for some questions for our speaker. Anyone?
Well,
and why do some fall into it? Because there are people who really have tragedy in life, but they don't become victims.
Yeah. Well, it has to do, I have been discussing this with my peer reviewers. I had 2 peer reviewers for this paper. I have been discussing this, and according to, they are both therapists and that's psychologists, it really depends on somebody's self-esteem. And when somebody grows up, let's say in a healthy family, with love from mother, father, etc., then there is good self-esteem, and then you're less vulnerable. but it's especially the socially disadvantaged, problem families, or a father who's missing or whatever, that it's very difficult for such a person to grow up with healthy self-esteem. So these people are more vulnerable for these hero images.
Okay, just to add on to that, one question. I'm working with the College of Medicine with psychiatrists, and they are working with that whole challenge of victimhood and people who are falling to addictions, and many women are experiencing anxiety.
Yeah.
And they want to play, my contribution would be the role of faith. So I'm just thinking, because like Mom and millions of others who were brought up as serfs in the totalitarian regime, were taken by Hitler, you know, she ended up, you know, being in the Nazis, part of the slave laborers, all of that.
Yeah.
And there's no way was my mother she ever play a role of victim, or many of the immigrants that came to Canada after World War II.
Yeah, I understand.
And a lot of that was a result of faith.
Sure. I think faith can definitely help, but what you see, I mean, let's face it, in Western Europe, in old DFAS countries, as I would call them, religion is on decline. So there is less influence of religion, and many youngsters are growing up without religion. But even then, I mean, your mother had a lot of hardship. So she had no chance to become narcissistic. Of course not chance to survive. But it's the seduction of the hero image that people are led to follow that makes them narcissistic. Without understanding that, they don't know it. But then you will act as if you are a victim when you cannot reach this heroism. It is interlinked.
So anxiety is narcissism?
No, anxiety is not narcissism. Narcissism, that can, yeah, let me try to explain. Suppose you see an image of somebody and you want to be like that person because the market imposes that on you, and you try to do everything, and so you're constantly busy with yourself trying to be that image. That is narcissistic, instead of doing your own identity formation, which has nothing to do with images or whatever. It's in you and has to do with your upbringing and all that. I have in my bigger paper that I couldn't present here, in my bigger paper I have a whole chapter on identity building, and then I can explain how that works. So true identity building has to do with family, ancestors, God, the self, training, professional training, education, and innate talents. So that is a lot. We have all a lot to work with, but we are led into a false road by this imposed image that we think we all have to be like that. So that's it.
Just a very quick question, then we need to move on to our next speaker. Guillermo, do you want to do a quick question? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Marijke. I want to make the link on what you said with some of yesterday's presentations that were focusing on social justice.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned not only the psychological, but the socio-psychological issues. And when Monsieur was asking about victims, I think one of the big changes in international criminal law has been recognizing the rights of victims.
Yes.
And this was Judge Louis-Joinet in the 90s. The right to know, the right to justice, the right to reparation, and the right to non-recurrence.
Yeah.
And I think we can also apply this that were fought for civil and political rights to victims of climate change.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it, and when we're talking about fake news, what is the science telling us about this is the right to know, to know the truth, the right to justice. When we were discussing yesterday how many cases are on courts because of this. The right to reparation.
Yeah.
And the UNFCCC,
Yeah.
the funds that have been created on this. Would you be able to elaborate on
Yeah,
that?
very shortly. Of course, I agree with you. But the point is that, let me be very general, populists don't identify with that part of the world. They think that UN and agreements and laws, etc., is all a white elite, and what do I have to do with it? Nobody is listening to me. You can have an agreement, you can have laws, you can have whatever, but nobody is listening to me. That is what they feel. So what can we do to make these people take part in society again, so that they do identify with these movements? That is the big question, the big challenge.
Thank you very much for a very thought-provoking paper, and we can continue these discussions during lunch, of course. Our next speakers, Dr. Jalkin and Antonis from the OAK here. Do you have a PowerPoint or just read? Great. Great. I'll just turn it over to you.
Do you mind if I keep my sitting here? Okay. Is it working? Yes. Okay. It's too loud. My voice is too loud. So it's your call. Okay. Okay. First of all, I want to thank to Lucas and everyone who accepted me in here as being with you. And I have to say that it's a great honor to meet you all. You are also beautiful people who are caring about the environment also. And I'm not going to talk about myself so long because it can take a long time, but I can say I'm a philosopher at Istanbul University, and I'm teaching applied philosophy. My personal concern is on the environmental ethics. That's how I came into the subject. So, okay, I'm just going to start now. Well, with the saying of the Mahatma Gandhi, he says, if you want to change the world, start with yourself. I think this is what I'm doing right now. Okay. So humankind, who has always desired to realize and sustain his natural and social existence in an integrity within the scope of basic concepts of, such as justice, order, law, right, freedom, and willpower, from past to present, has assumed a pathetically superior attitude towards the nature of which he is a part and which the aforementioned concepts are included naturally. Instead of adapting to and facing naturality, mankind has got estranged from it and tried to adapt it to himself and chosen to exploit it. Today, as like simply affirming Henry Kissinger's quote, who controls the food supply can control the people, who controls the energy can control whole continents, who controls money can control the world. Humanity unfortunately ignores its war against nature. As a result of competition of power and targeting authority in both intercontinental and international level, humankind tolerates the destruction of nature in line with their own benefits. So certainly one of the major reasons for that condition can be associated with the fact that, as Russell indicates, majority of humanity, which we can call as insensitive, considers the nature as a raw material for themselves and also a part of human race who doesn't participate in active administration. What is missed out here is that nature is the whole itself, whereas human is just part of it. The part can complete the whole, but that doesn't mean that the part, which is a particular element, can manage the whole, which has a universal structure. To express more clearly, the part is not capable of managing the whole. In other words, nature is unmanageable. Well, right here, I think we can turn our eyes into the first chapters of Genesis, where God makes everything clear and gives commands to humanity. As we see, these are the commands which will guide whole humanity, I believe us all, without being eliminated. into fullness of the spiritual and material goods. In Genesis, as I see 1.28, God tells us to have dominion over the earth. Before the action, I think one should sit and think about it. What does it mean? We know, we are sitting in these chairs, know that God's simply mean is we are here to care for the earth as God's self care for it and as care for us. Well, if we take a look of its etymological roots, as I learned, the dominion means the rule in the place of God, and the word, and this Greek Septuagint, the word full dominion includes the word kyrios, kyrios, which is the word that is used for Christ, the ruler as being word of the God's self. So that explanation brings the clear idea that as human beings, we have to enter into God's will and rule as God would do, as following God. And again, as it's mentioned in Genesis 2.15, God tells us that we are to cultivate and keep the Garden of Eden. This literally means that humans are required to serve the earth as well as to protect it from destruction or exploitation. That's true that we own responsibilities to God, our Creator, for how we use and care for the earth. We have to be thankful for what we have and remember that we also do have personal responsibilities to identify and adopt appropriate moral and ethical approaches to the changing conditions of the world for good. Contrary to what is believed by majority of people who can be qualified as insensitive, the nature which has a complete structure with its own laws is not handed over to mankind to be randomly consumed as a raw material. It isn't possible for any human to produce something that doesn't exist in the nature, from the nature, and then include that thing in it only on behalf of the nature. So human, as an intelligent being, who is trying to make sense of his own existence, should primarily consume from the nature only as much as he needs and be contented with that within his own naturality. We have to remember that although human is described as a social being, it's not possible to separate him from the nature. Nature is the basic element of human's existence as a human being. Human fulfills his existence as part of that social structure and position within the boundaries of the nature. Therefore, human is primarily responsible for approaching his present condition in the face of the nature from a humanistic point of view within the frame of a consciousness through which solutions can be generated according to the common goals. Because the nature, whose basic principle is causality, clearly displays a presence which dominates humanity instead of submitting to it when embraced within its own historicity. In fact, humanity has determined living conditions according to the possibilities provided by the nature for AIDS. This matter, which directly takes us to the problem area that can be called posterity, underlines the importance and the role of the education in developing social consciousness to prevent ecological impairments and protect the nature. Within the frame of the problematic of our paper, it's possible to state that humans today should primarily focus on raising consciousness in all societies worldwide for the purpose of realizing the seriousness of the present situation, arranging necessary prevention plans, and offering long-term solutions within the context of the global climate change and natural disasters. Well, this condition clearly reveals that the relation between theory and practice has such a complete structure, and one cannot exist without the other in the context of reality. This problem area, which can be evaluated as a great dishonor in terms of humanity, and which positions the nature against human, has been solemnly brought up the world agenda by the rising generation, who advocates the nature to protect their rights for the sustainability of both themselves and posterity. The acts organized consciously and sensibly within the scope of the global climate change and natural disasters to be caused by that change. The banners used in the protest demonstrations on now and before not only reveal the failure of the humanity, but also stress that the problem is basically an existence problem of the humanity. Now apparently the solution offers and prevention plans concerning this macro level problem can be qualified as global based on the motto "it's never too late to mend," also would be carried into effect within the universal solidarity as part of micro level efforts and collaborations. These general determinations lightening the way for the helplessness of humans against nature due to their unconsciousness, and in this context, the protests aiming to expand awareness in the universal dimension may firstly arouse an idea that the major question here is the sustainability of the nature in some minds, within the context of the sustainability, which is one of the most popular concepts of the present day. However, this is a complete mistake, because sustainability is immanent in the nature. As indicated above, human can neither create something that doesn't exist in nature of which he is a part, nor do better than the nature concerning its sustainability under the principles of nature. Going deep down the iceberg, it's seen that primary problem faced by humanity is sustainability of existence of human as a human being. In this context, we need to listen what would nature say. What would nature say? What it says can be heard by St. Nilus of Ankara, we say, Ankara, you say, as it is mentioned in Epistles 2 and 119. Look within yourself, and there you will see the entire world. We all must confess that there is no doubt that the pollution and degradation and degeneration of the world is directly related to the pollution and degradation of our hearts. Unfortunately, we must admit that our pride, gratitude as persons, as nations, and as believers in different religions, and whatever else you call, has replaced with greed. And sadly, we fell into the world's biggest sin as being human beings. We, not we, but human beings have forgotten God and forgone our mandate responsibilities. Instead of keeping and saving our gift that is given by God, we heedlessly take from earth and needlessly waste its sources. Instead of focusing the real meaning of the garden, which implies an expectation that we are to share the things of the world with those who are suffering, with those in need, and to have concern for the good for humanity and the entire creation by ignoring our greedy expectations, which will have negative effects upon the life of our neighbors and life of the world. Well, this brings us to the idea that is mentioned in Peter 2.5. We should consider each person has a priestly responsibility before God. Where I mean we have to serve God in the way that God taught us, with love. We have to serve our God because God loves us and still believes in us. I believe I have rights to say it because I am just right here, right now, still using the time and trying to make a difference in life as following his love, as he is love. We all know that God's gospel of love teaches us that our response to welfare of our neighbor and respect for the creation are the expressions of our love for God. So as I have mentioned previously, we all personally responsible to identify and adopt appropriate moral and ethical and precisely technical approaches to the changing conditions of the world. In our name, when I say our, in our name, we believe one of the important issues is to embrace nature within its own historicity, to emphasize which essential elements should be insisted by taking into account the conditions of the next generation according to today's conditions. We must admit that one of the basic elements is education, which will guide the society correctly. Education will serve for the right awareness of the society, at the same time ensure the solidarity of the peoples for common purpose. Education will keep society's awareness at the highest level in terms of the severity of the situation. Thus, the precautions and solutions to be taken will be realized on a more cognitive level. Considering today's conditions, the main issues that need to be addressed within the general framework of education are environmental pollution and exploitation of nature. Again, in this scope, we can list the solutions that need to be emphasized in direct proportion to the causes of global climate change as renewable energy, tree cultivation, and consumption at the level of need. Well, considering that carbon-based consumption is the main problem in climate change and today's technological developments, the point that we would like to emphasize here will be the importance and necessity of the recycling and renewable energy. For instance, let's talk about water recycling. Why it should be important? As even in the Bible, water is a well-known symbol for the Word of God. It's in Ephesians 5.26 and John 15.3 and in Psalms 119 and 9. In these parts, instead of or beside baptism itself as an action, the word water refers words of God, especially in Peter 1.25 till 23 to 25 and James 1.18. You all know better than me, but the point is when we read God's word, it washes from our minds the wrong ideas so we can understand him and comprehend his salvation as water cleans the dirt from the surface. Even though water is that important figure since the ancient times till today, we can even address the Thales himself, I think. We are facing with the fact that even though we are facing with the fact of drought and our oceans and seas are poisoned, not only us but also whole creation will be affected by our ignorance. So, and if we come to renewable energy, now I believe my colleague Antonio will give you more information in detail that will help us to bring the solutions on realistically levels according to bringing and applying technology on our humanistical and idealistical solutions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Yazgan, for your presentation. In order to also focus on another point and give another dimension, if you want, to this philosophic approach. Previously, we have heard here about the monasteries who have a forest. Imagine the Paris that will have also a new way to cover its energy needs. So we'll gather the plants with the new technology. So we will, the first step is to lower the energy consumption and be as environmental as friendly. And the second step, the energy that we need as a necessity to be covered by, for instance, photovoltaic as they use it in this church in the Netherlands. I think it's a very nice example, what they have done in this specific parish. Imagine if this is the case in all the churches. What will be the message for all the people? Actually, I can show you some more examples. And the Netherlands may say that you don't have so much sun, but still, in that cases, it works. 2 days ago, it was something really important from the United Nations. A really shocking news. This last 5 years period, from 2017 until 2019, are the hottest as a record, as a world record. This is a case. This is not any fake news from the internet. It's the United Nations who point that out. So it's something serious that's happening around us. It's a ringing bell really loudly, but we have to hear it. It's the responsibility for each one of us to hear it. And as we have heard about the popularism, which is also the case in Greece, may I say, and that it's a nice coincidence that he can speak after you in order to point out some issues. Here in Greece also, we have a lot of people who say, who cares about the climate change? It's not an issue, it's a fake news, let's say. And what is more, we have also this discussion about the natural gas, about oil. They might find some extra ways to take it from the earth, the southern part of Crete and the eastern part of Greece. So there is a lot of people who say climate change is not existing. What is the answer from the science? I know I'm an engineer, but I will not try to kill you with a lot of graphs, but this is important, and it's not that complex. From year to year, and from decades to decades, from centuries to centuries, the temperature of the Earth does change. It goes up and down. You see it's 800,000 years here, and the temperature does goes up and down. That's the case. That's what happens. But the point is, the last few years, it goes crazy up. What I wanted to point out is exactly that one, is that the rate of warming of Earth for the next century is at least 20 times faster. This rate is extremely unusual. It has never, ever happened in the life of Earth. So the temperature does go up and down, that's normal, but the case that we have here, from this extremely high rate, 20 times more than the usual, verifies that climate change is here. And this data is from NASA, actually. And I try to be very careful with that. It's for NASA, it's the observatory, the official of NASA. So we have to keep an eye on that. And what is more, also at the site of NASA, once again, in order to be as reliable as possible, is this graph too, is the historical CO2 levels. CO2 levels we can have from a number of reasons. For instance, from volcanoes, from extreme cases like big fires. But the point is, from after 1950, it keeps going up. It's the highest historical level ever. It's not because of any natural disaster. It's mainly because of us, because of our factories, because of our emissions with our cars, with our everyday attitude. Please keep that in mind. So, what is actually happening around us? Just one photo. It's from the North Pole. It's 1981 to 2010, the data. It's recorded data once again. We have lost 10 times the area of the UK if you count it as an ice. Imagine that. 10 times the area of UK. We have lost it already. It was 2010. And it keeps going on. It's not only actually North Pole, but it's also Greenland, Canada, and so on. Let's go to the next case. Anchorage. All-time heat record. 32 Celsius, 90 Fahrenheit. It has never, ever happened again. They do have some cases that they have faced extreme temperatures, but this kind of case, never. And it happened now, this summer, July 4th, 2019. And these are the other cases with the fires. That's the data from 2001, and it's going up to today. This year, as you already know from the news, we had extreme fires in Amazon, extreme fires in Siberia, extreme fires also in Africa. As a lot of scientists say, in all these climate change models, they have not taken account any other extreme cases that may happen, any other natural disaster. This is one of them that they have not taken into account. And these fires keep going on. If we don't have any rain, then the possibility of having a fire is increasing. It's increasing crazy, may I say. Can we forget these California fires in November 2018? I think that we cannot. This fire has destroyed a huge also forest. So combine all these small pieces of the puzzle. and go back to your home. This is our fires that we had in 2018 here in the municipality of Apocornas in Chania. So it's not happening something, this is not happening something far away from us. It's actually at our home. Another case, let's go to the floods. This is Saudi Arabia. This is a camel. And all these are the waters. It's a flood. That happened November 2018. One more extreme case at the desert. We had also floods here. It was February 24, 25, 25th, 2019. Actually, it was the worst winter that we have ever. Lots of areas was just flooded. We had a lot of issues, especially at this local municipality of Platanias, and it was again the worst case ever. We had once again floods in 2015. This is the old harbor that we are going to meet at night today. So another case was the extreme dust transfer from the Africa. It is also a case, a symbol of the climate change. And that's my favorite, let's say, slide. And when we have students and pupils around, especially during the winter, I'm always asking them, do you think it's Nepal or a mountain or whatever? No, it's not. It's Sahara Desert. January 5th, 2018. And the issue is, like the previous cases, that it was not just an extreme case that happened once upon a time. All these cases keep continuing. And we have more and more frequently these cases of extremes, either with no rain, either with too much rain, either with dust, either with snow. Extreme cases which are coming frequently and frequently. And it's not only Sahara, but it's also our home. 2004, this is Chania. Here in Chania, we don't have ever snow. In 2004, when I was in Canada, actually, we did have. So they have sent me the photos and they tell me, we have more snow than you. It was real, actually. February 13th, 2004. So let's identify some major sources of pollution. Let's go back to the science and find some real data from the European Environmental Agency. So they have made their studies and they have found out that the power plants across Europe, especially the coal-fired ones, are responsible for the largest amount of key pollutants released into the air, according to the updated institutional pollution data that they have collected. It's real. It's at the internet. You can go there and see it. So that's why we focus here at the Academy on the energy issue. The pollution which comes out of the energy factor is the most crucial one, which puts extra loads to our environment, to our nature. That's why we have to be very careful about the energy consumption that we have to lower, and also which way we will use in order to produce our energy. Of course, there are choices. Once again, I really like to show some churches. This is the case at the northern France. Again, the Paris decided, they found the money, they have done all the procedure in order to put some photovoltaic. And actually, they have tried to make it as architectural friendly as possible. So it will be an harmony of the photovoltaics to be integrated at the building. And I think it's a pretty nice photo, isn't it? Together with the tree. And also that's the case in some schools. So I think this message is important. So if we go back to the parishes or back to the schools of our children and say that, okay, we can give another message. You can give another way in our everyday life and use this kind of photovoltaics, this kind of technology in order to produce our energy. I think these messages are strong. Even at solar street lighting, what I wanted to point out also is in the UK. UK is not the most sunny place on the world. It's even worse than Holland. So, but this system still work. And this is also example from Slovenia, the solar street lighting. Some say about the color, that in order to, as an excuse not to integrate it at the building. Go for red. Their technology does offer us different cases. Also for shading, in order to have some shades, we can use also photovoltaics. The point is that the time is limited and it's time for actual decisions. This is an actual photo too from Greece, from coal-fired factories that we have in order to produce energy, and this is what would happen. Imagine that the people who are living in this area, they're actually people living in this area, and they have to breathe all this pollution. And imagine it in what happens also in China, in India, all over the world. This is the alternative that we have in our academy. This is actually our first installation of 80 kilowatts in order to cover our energy needs. Time for actions. This week, we're very happy actually with Lucas when we selected these dates and we found out that this week is the global climate strike all over the world. So it's our contribution to this week, let's say, yeah? Yeah. Because not by coincidence. And this happens all over the world. The young pupils, the young generation is very active. That's a good message. And they are facing this issue of climate change very seriously. And as Greta Thunberg always says, let's give the time and hear the scientists. It's important. This is the photo from Australia, excuse me, that they are pretty, they're full of energy, the pupils there, but also the case all over the world. So, from the message of the patriarch that we had the honor to hear it here in our conference, he was pointing out one of the things that he was telling is the community way of thinking. And this is what we have to think also. And energy cooperatives can combine this community way of thinking. Instead of going back to our egoism, let's go back to our parish, to our neighbor, to our community, and start this kind of discussions. They can give us a different vision. I do believe that. We have tried to find some historical data here from Crete, from Kissamos, and right after the Second World War, after the Germans left Crete, some people decided in 1945 that, okay, let's cooperate with each other and produce our own energy. And they did it. And imagine the case of these communities in 1945 after the war. Everything was destroyed. But the people decided to sit in a table, discuss, and they found a solution together with the priest. Church is always, that's a nice message too. It's always present at these cases. The teacher of the school, the presidents of the school, and also all the people that have contributed whatever they could actually. Imagine this case. And here is the first electricity that they had, the historical photo actually, at that case, at that period of time. Nowadays, also Professor Ioannis Vourdoubas mentioned about the cooperatives in Europe. We have about more than nowadays we have more than 2,300 energy cooperatives all over the world. We have exactly the same idea, and we have done conferences. And actually, it was a very interesting case from Germany, which I wanted to point out. That it was a small village, and the people themselves decided that we want to change our energy model. So they found the location, they found the company who produces the windmills, and they decided, okay, we want to put a windmill there. So everybody was happy with that. And they had also the serious economic effect in their own pocket, but also the environmental advantages were really, really important. That's the idea of the energy cooperatives in whole Europe. Two huge and good examples of good practices is EcoPower for Belgium, over 50,000 participants, and also at Spain, Somenergia, over 34,000 participants and over 51,000 customers. One more nice example is from Canada. I had to include Canada too, from Ottawa. One more church that they have put also the cross and the photovoltaic in order to cover their energy and their own energy needs. And actually, that's the message. That's the so strong message. We have the theology, so let's go to practice. And so that's the next step. In a few months, during the summer of 2020, there's a small company in Germany. Actually, they produce a photovoltaic car as a mass production car, as an electric car, but They have put photovoltaics in every point that they could, and it will cost 25,000 euros together with the batteries. So imagine if we combine technologies to reduce our pollutants, as I have shown you before in the previous slides, and have a different way of living, a different way of life, a different philosophy. Thank you so much for hearing me once again, and I would be more than glad to answer your questions.
Thank you. I think we have time for one or two very quick questions. I'm going to bring up a video from Dr. Duarte, and we'll watch a short video. So don't go on climate change strike yet before lunch. Any questions?
Oh, it's 19. Where's the sound?
Τάκη, έρχεσαι μια στιγμή. Φτιάξουμε τον ήχο.
No questions? Yes, go ahead. For Marika?
Yes. A question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I have a question.
Watch the video. Yeah. You want to ask it? Say.
About Istanbul.
About Istanbul?
Yes.
Okay.
We see that Istanbul is the...
Can I just go
Okay.
here? I don't want to be...
The volume is here. Okay. Play.
Yeah,
And volume is here.
We know
So,
that
thank you.
Istanbul is the city process, development process in the city. As you, as a careful observer, do you believe that this process in the eco-friendly or new
Do you ask me, do you think that the media gives the right information to people about
not
the
related, no.
climate?
There is a new process in Istanbul about a new airport, new rail, city railroad, metro. Yes. Yes. I ask your idea. If you believe that the process
What
is
happened, what I believe is what happened in the last 12, 15
Yeah.
years, everything was against the world and the Greeks and everything else. It was like it was all against the nature, the state of nature. So, the answer to
Yeah,
that
yes.
is what
But
I
you-
think is it's just green up.
Could you please explain why you believe that the process
Because
is
they don't care about the scientific data, scientific data. They're not following them. For example, let's take the airport. They want to do the airport for their benefits, for money issues, probably, as we thought. And then they choose the place which is out of Istanbul. You know, it's very far away from the main area. And then I don't think he really looked at the projects.
what do you mean by he?
The president, I'm talking about. So I don't think he checked the whole projects and say that it is this main area is the area that the birds, how do you say it? Birds in migration is on that way, but they thought that it's not a big deal. And then that happened. What happened is like the birds are crashing into the airplanes and the glass is being broken. So it's dangerous for both humankind and also for animals. But who cares?
So we can add this example as what the populist government do with
I had an example
Yeah.
for you. For example, we heard that this company from Canada they were making this road searching on mountains. So we had this very big protest
Okay, thank you. We have to watch the film now. The film is about 20 minutes, and then we'll go directly to lunch. We have 1/2 hour for lunch, then we are going to meet outside for the bus, which is going to take us on our tour. So again, this video is about 20 minutes. So we should end right on time, or a little few minutes later.
Okay. Καλημέρα. I'm here to make a video recording of my conference on the topic shown on this slide about the influence of the Revelation book of John on the eco-theology of Laudato Si, the encyclica from Pope Francisco. It's my pleasure to be here. I wish to thank you for being on the conference and for viewing this recording. I also wish to thank the organizers of this meeting for having invited me to this conference. Just a few words about myself. My name is José Cardoso Duarte, and I'm been acting during my professional life as a researcher on biotechnology and the environment. It's my main topic of professional activity since I made my PhD in 1982 and then became principal researcher of the National Laboratory for Industry, Energy and Environment Research at Lisbon, Portugal. I acted as a director of several research projects at national, European and international level, and several appointments in this area for both national and community European Commission. And also I became in 2011 president of IAMAO, International Association for Agro-Mediterranean Wastes, an international association based on Italy. Also, after that, I went to retirement, and I've been dedicated to these topics of science and religion and its influence on other aspects of our social and economical life. And in this respect, in 2018, I came to know the Global Catholic Climate Movement. Then I became a Laudato Si animator, and this is also through the GCCM news that I learned about this conference, and it's why I am here today to show you about my work. Today we may say that life is in danger, but the important question it is, which life, and what, and who is endangering it? We live in a world dominated by entropy, as the recent number of La Recherche of February 2019 has shown in a special number. And the Entropy Law is a law that brings uncertainty to our future, and we must live with this. To have a concept of entropy, a very quick one, let us think of a town. It looks very ordered, with streets, squares, public buildings, and private houses. But this order is cause of destruction somewhere else. And it is inevitable. The Entropy Law ensures that at the end of a process or transformation, like the building of a town, On a closed system, entropy, the final entropy, must have increased. This action of entropy is reflected on the encyclica by the dramatic confrontation of our reality, human growth and greed, resulting in harm and loss of quality to our environment, an evidence of this entropy increase. We know since many decades ago, from the Blueprint for Survival, published by the Club of Rome already in 1972, that essential nutrients for our survival will at some point during this century become limiting. We also know that our most successful way of economic and social living, capitalism, with its law of growth of profit and its growth dynamics, will not stop until profit law cannot be anymore applied. And that means that all the perverse effects of it, both at natural and social level, can only be aggravated in the future. As a consequence of these interactions, limitation of resources and capitalistic exploitation, all causing increase of entropy, population growth will have to be coming to a stop at any time with devastating consequences. Is there a way to stop this entropic devastation of our human system and the nature where we live? In the Laudato Si, this fragility of our human and physical world can only be opposed by moral law, and this has to be anchored, at least for believers, on the eternal life of God and this Word, the Son, Jesus Christ. Let us then go back and listen to some of the most surprising words of Jesus. No one knows the Father, only the Son. It's from Matthew 11:27. And then from several references of John. I am in the Father, and the Father in me. The Father knows me, and I know the Father. No one comes to the Father except by me. These words tell us of a different world of our physical world, the world of Jesus. Remember, my kingdom is not of this world. Jesus also added, my task is to bear witness to the truth. For this I was born, for this I came into the world. So these words tell us of a different world of our physical world, the world of Jesus. To believe in these words of Jesus, they tell us about the essence of a certain world, and the essence of that world is truth, or to be true. In a world of truth, obviously, there is no entropy, as entropy is per definition the incomplete information about the system. If you know the truth, you know everything that can be known, and then entropy has to be zero, just exist. Jesus came to be witness to the truth, therefore to tell us that a world of no entropy, of truth, exists. And all that are not deaf to truth, listen to my voice, he exclaimed. How must we take these two worlds, the natural world of entropy and the world of the Word, into consideration when trying to find a solution for the problems that humanity in the physical world are suffering? we find in the encyclica a number of significant references to the Gospels, in all 16, of which 8 of Matthew, 2 of Mark, 3 of Luke, and 3 of John. They are the cornerstone for a Christian reading of the encyclica, since they appeal to Jesus as the Son of God, or as John calls him on the prologue, the Word. The Word then was with God at the beginning, and through him all things came to be. No single thing was created without him. When John puts the faith in Jesus Christ in these terms, we are left with no alternative in considering the realm of nature, and in particular its ecology, defining what we could designate by an eco-theology, or more precisely, an eco-Christology. This makes us remember the Christology of Father Teilhard de Chardin, with his cosmic vision of Christ, the Alpha and the Omega of universal evolution. View that also shared by Pope Francisco in the encyclica, specifically present on its paragraph 83, the first time ever that Teilhard de Chardin is directly referred on a Pope encyclica, albeit as a single bibliographical note. However, these visions represent our hope that these two worlds can be historically combined. How can we combine, or in a certain way judge these two realities in our world? By the criteria of truth that Jesus pointed us. In a way, truth and light, illuminatio, are realities of the domain of the invisible rather than of the visible world. They are opposed by lie and darkness, and therefore by sin. It is this sin that causes all the evil things that come to light in the world: envy, war, ignominies, exploitation, and depredation, not only of men, but also of all other living things, pollution, and so on. Where can we find in our lives this kingdom of God, this invisible kingdom of life? In the secret of our heart, as Jesus himself said, there where God sees us more deeply than we can see ourselves. It is therefore not by chance that the word heart is repeated at least 20 times on this encyclica, as many as the name of Jesus. When we sin, we expel God from the heart. We forget our conditions of sons and daughters of God. We forget about our generation on the love between the Father and the firstborn, the archi-son, on the eternal archi-generation of life. This phenomenology of life was developed by the French philosopher Michel Henry, born 1922 and died 2002. Henry developed this phenomenology of life, assimilating the concept of truth to that of life. Life meaning what created itself and lives for itself. It is why to listen to the word is consubstantial to the human nature. It is this identity of man's auto-revelation in the heart and the God's revelation on the word that explains why God sees in the secret of the hearts. He wrote in Parole du Christ, 2002, the year of his death. And it is this phenomenology then that becomes relevant for discovering the inner sense of the Pope encyclica. To listen to the truth in our heart is the only way to stop disaster. So, to close, we are now in better position to understand the three references that we find in the encyclica from the book of the Revelation of John. In my view, They are essential to understand the encyclica and to seal it from misinterpretations. In a way, they give unity to all the encyclica and at the same time align it with the eschatology of the Church. Due to short time, we can only briefly comment on them. First citation, the Song of the Lamb. Great and marvelous are thy deeds, O Lord God. This citation comes on paragraph 74 of the encyclica, therefore on the beginning. It refers the people of God that suffers the reverses of history, such as the Babylonian and Roman captivity periods, and can only find hope for the future by turning again to the Lord, putting on him the confidence on the final victory. And as Francisco puts it, therefore injustice is not invincible. The second reference, next appeared the great portent in heaven, a woman robed with the sun beneath her feet, the moon, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. This passage of the Revelation book marks the final preparation for the victory of God over evil, the end of darkness power. Francisco sees in this woman the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, now the mother and caretaker of all suffering mankind and of all creation. Again, Pope Francisco believes on this essential role of Mary, and by placing this reference on paragraph 241, on the last title of the encyclica, the Queen of all creation. He points, therefore, to it as essential to the plan of our salvation. Third reference, and last one. Then you sat on the throne, said, Behold, I'm making all things new. For Pope Francisco, this is the key that closes the encyclica teachings and opens us to the mystery of the universe, on the way to the certain day of eternity, to the New Jerusalem, to the common house on heaven, as written on paragraph 243 of Laudato Si. This proclamation of Jesus on the Revelation book could well be the closing of the encyclica, signaling the victory of life against entropy. More than a chart for saving the earth, the encyclica is an hymn to God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So now for conclusion. This trilogy of citations of the Book of Revelation represent the key for a faithful reading of the encyclica and for a faithful reading of the encyclica and for the recognition of the ecotheology in it. Much more than an ecology of the world, it is an ecology of the man's soul, an ecology for restoring our true life, invisible, the life that recognizes itself, suffers itself, feels itself, but that is dependent on the eternal life that constantly springs from the world. The Laudato Si encyclic comes therefore as a new charter for mankind's survival, and even more, as a charter for restoring the social and cultural evolution of humanity at risk, a rewrite of the Revelation of John. Thank you all for listening. Eucharisto. I wish you a very good and productive conference, and if you want, please contact me at my mail, solarsantiago@gmail.com. Just to show you a beautiful picture of my region with Montbor Castle and the Mondego River, and the season of the grape harvest is just starting, and I hope that while you are there, I will have to be exactly picking up the grapes here at my place. Again, Eucharisto.